Welcome to a moment that invites you to slow down just enough to see what most people rush past. You are here not because you want instant change, but because you sense that real transformation happens quietly, through small choices repeated with intention. This audiobook is a journey into understanding how progress actually works, how the smallest shifts, made consistently, can reshape the direction of your life over time. It is not about chasing perfection or forcing dramatic change. It is about learning to respect the power of steady improvement and trusting the process that unfolds when you commit to growing just a little every day. As you listen, allow the ideas to settle naturally. There is no pressure to rush, no need to compare, and no expectation to become someone else overnight. This experience is designed to help you notice what truly matters, refine what already exists within you, and build momentum without burnout. What you are about to hear is calm, grounded, and deeply intentional, created for listeners who understand that lasting success is rarely loud, but always consistent. Let this be the space where clarity replaces urgency and progress begins to feel inevitable. This is where small steps start to matter more than big promises. And this is where the journey begins. Chapter 1. The day you realize small changes control big outcomes, there is a specific kind of realization that doesn't arrive with noise or drama. It doesn't announce itself as a turning point. It arrives quietly, often when you are alone with your thoughts, looking at your life and wondering how you ended up exactly where you are. Nothing feels suddenly wrong, yet something feels off. You start to notice that your days look similar, your routines repeat, and your future seems to be moving in a direction you never consciously chose. This is the day you begin to understand that your life was not shaped by one big decision, but by hundreds of small ones you barely noticed. You think back and realize there was no single moment where everything went right or wrong. There was no dramatic failure or massive breakthrough. Instead, there were small habits you ignored, tiny comforts you chose, minor efforts you skipped, and little disciplines you postponed. None of them felt important at the time. Each one felt harmless. But together, they quietly built the life you are living now. This realization can feel uncomfortable because it removes the illusion that change requires something extraordinary. You no longer get to wait for the perfect moment, the right opportunity, or a sudden burst of motivation. You begin to see that control has always been closer than you thought, hidden inside the smallest choices you make every day. Think about how most people imagine change. They picture a complete transformation, a new routine, a new identity, a dramatic decision that fixes everything at once. But real life rarely works that way. Real change is subtle. It happens when you choose to do one small thing differently, then repeat it long enough for it to matter. Consider someone who feels unhappy with their health. They often believe they need a strict plan, intense effort, and total discipline to improve. But what actually creates change is not a perfect system. It is a small decision repeated consistently. Choosing to move a little more, choosing slightly better food, choosing to stop quitting after a few days. None of these actions feel powerful on their own. But over months and years, they completely reshape the body and the mind. The same is true for confidence. People assume confidence comes from big wins or external validation. In reality, confidence grows from small promises kept to yourself. Waking up when you said you would. Finishing what you start. Speaking up once, even when it feels uncomfortable. Each small action sends a message to your mind you are reliable. Over time, that message becomes belief. The problem is that small changes do not provide immediate reward. They feel slow, they feel invisible. And because the human mind is drawn to instant results, most people dismiss them. They underestimate what consistency can do and overestimate what intensity can fix. This is why so many people feel stuck. They keep waiting for a big change while repeating the same small behaviors every day. And those behaviors, even when they seem insignificant, keep producing the same outcomes. The day you realize small changes control big outcomes is the day you stop looking for dramatic solutions and start paying attention to patterns. You notice how you spend the first hour of your day. You notice how you react when something becomes uncomfortable. You notice whether you avoid or engage when effort is required. These moments don't look important, but they are shaping everything. Small changes work because they bypass resistance. A massive change demands courage, motivation, and energy all at once. A small change asks very little. It slips past fear. It feels manageable. And because it feels manageable, you repeat it. Repetition is where power lies. Over time, these small changes begin to compound. At first, nothing seems different. Then slowly you notice subtle shifts. Tasks feel easier. Decisions feel clearer. Your self-respect grows quietly. Eventually, you look back and realize the gap between who you were and who you are has widened, without a single dramatic moment marking the transition. This realization also brings responsibility. Once you understand that small choices shape big outcomes, excuses lose their strength. You can no longer say that nothing you do matters. You see that everything matters, just not all at once. This does not mean you must control every detail of your life. It means you must respect the direction your habits are taking you. Every small action is a vote for the kind of person you are becoming. One vote may not decide anything, but repeated votes always do. The day you realize this is not the day your life changes instantly. It is the day your perspective changes. And perspective is what determines behavior. From that point forward, you stop asking what huge change you need to make and start asking what small adjustment you can commit to today. That question is powerful because it removes overwhelm. It turns growth into something you can handle, something you can repeat, something you can sustain. Big outcomes are rarely the result of big decisions. They are the result of small decisions honored consistently over time. And once you truly understand that, progress stops feeling mysterious, it becomes intentional. Chapter 2e, Why Progress Rarely Comes from Massive Effort. There is a belief deeply wired into most people from an early age: if you want better results, you must push harder, work longer, try more, give everything at once. This belief sounds logical, even admirable, and for a short time, it often works. Massive effort creates movement. It feels productive. It gives the illusion of progress. But over time, something strange happens. The results slow down, resistance grows, and exhaustion replaces momentum. Progress rarely comes from massive effort because massive effort depends on force, and force is difficult to sustain. Think about how people usually approach change. They wait until frustration peaks, then decide to fix everything at once. A complete routine overhaul, extreme discipline, unrealistic expectations. For a few days or weeks, they operate at maximum intensity. Then life intervenes. Energy drops. Motivation fades. One missed day turns into guilt, and guilt turns into quitting. The effort was real, but it was too heavy to carry long term. Massive effort fails because it demands too much willpower. Willpower is not infinite. It fluctuates with stress, emotions, sleep, and circumstances. When progress relies entirely on willpower, it collapses the moment life becomes uncomfortable, which it always does. Real progress requires something quieter and more reliable than intensity. It requires repeatability. Consider how learning actually works. No one masters a skill in a single burst of effort. Progress comes from gradual exposure, small improvements, and consistent practice. The brain adapts slowly. Muscles adapt slowly. Identity adapts slowly. Massive effort tries to force change faster than the system can absorb it. This creates another problem. Massive effort increases pressure. When expectations are high and results take time, disappointment grows. You begin to judge yourself harshly. You feel like you are failing, even though you are trying harder than ever. This emotional weight makes continuation even harder. Progress stalls not because you lack ability, but because the approach is unsustainable. There is also a psychological trap hidden inside massive effort. It allows procrastination disguised as preparation. People wait for the moment they can give everything. Until then, they do nothing. They believe partial effort is pointless, so they avoid starting at all. This keeps progress permanently delayed. Progress does not require everything. It requires something done consistently. Small, controlled effort works because it respects reality. It fits into real days, real energy levels, and real limitations. It does not require perfect conditions. It survives bad moods, busy schedules, and unexpected setbacks. That survival is what makes it powerful. Another reason massive effort fails is that it often targets symptoms instead of systems. People try to fix outcomes without addressing behaviors. They chase results instead of redesigning routines. When effort stops, everything reverts back. Small effort, when applied to systems, changes the structure that produces results. Once the structure changes, progress continues even when motivation drops. Massive effort also creates an all or nothing mindset. You are either fully committed or completely off track. This mindset leaves no room for recovery. One mistake feels like total failure. Small effort allows flexibility. Miss a day and you continue the next. No drama, no collapse. Over time, small effort builds trust. You begin to trust yourself because you keep showing up. That trust reduces internal resistance. Tasks feel lighter because they are no longer emotionally charged. Progress becomes part of your identity rather than a constant struggle. This is why progress rarely comes from massive effort. Massive effort is loud, visible, and exhausting. Sustainable progress is quiet, steady, and often overlooked. It does not impress at first, but it accumulates. The most meaningful changes in life, confidence, discipline, skill, clarity, are not built in moments of intensity. They are built in moments of consistency. They grow when effort is small enough to repeat and strong enough to matter. When you understand this, you stop asking how hard you can push and start asking how long you can continue. That question changes everything. Progress stops being something you chase and becomes something you build, step by step, without burning yourself in the process. Chapter 3. The invisible power of tiny daily decisions every day, long before you make any big choice. Your life is already being shaped by decisions so small you barely register them. They don't feel important. They don't come with consequences you can see immediately. And that is exactly why they are powerful. These tiny daily decisions quietly determine direction while you are busy focusing on bigger concerns. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly become disciplined, confident, skilled, or stuck. You arrive there gradually, guided by choices that felt too small to matter. Whether you check your phone the moment you wake up or take a few minutes to think. Whether you follow through on something minor or postpone it again. Whether you react emotionally or pause before responding. These moments feel insignificant, but they are not neutral. Each one nudges your life slightly in a direction. What makes these decisions invisible is their lack of drama. Big decisions announce themselves. Tiny ones blend into routine. Yet routines are where identity forms. You don't become someone through what you plan, you become someone through what you practice. Consider how habits begin. No one sets out to build a negative habit intentionally. It starts with a small allowance. Just this once. Just today. Just for a few minutes. The mind records the behavior, not the intention. Over time, repetition removes friction. What once felt optional becomes automatic. The habit no longer requires a decision. It simply happens. The same process works in the opposite direction. Positive change rarely begins with enthusiasm. It begins with a small choice made despite indifference. You choose to do something slightly better than before, not because you feel inspired, but because you decided it matters. That choice, repeated, builds momentum quietly. Tiny decisions matter because they influence self-perception. Each time you follow through, you reinforce the belief that you are someone who acts. Each time you avoid, you reinforce the belief that you hesitate. These beliefs don't form overnight, but they solidify through repetition. Eventually, they feel like facts. This is why people often say, "That's just how I am," without realizing they trained themselves into that identity through countless small decisions. The identity feels permanent, but it was built gradually. Another reason these decisions are powerful is that they operate below resistance. Big goals trigger fear, doubt, and pressure. Small actions slip past those defenses. They don't demand confidence. They don't require motivation. They only require agreement. And agreement is easier to give than commitment. Over time, these tiny decisions accumulate into patterns. Patterns become habits. Habits become lifestyle. And lifestyle produces outcomes. By the time the outcome is visible, the decisions that created it are long forgotten. This is why change often feels mysterious in hindsight. You look at someone's progress and assume something significant must have happened. In reality, something small happened repeatedly. Tiny decisions also compound emotionally. They influence how you handle discomfort. Each time you choose avoidance, discomfort grows stronger. Each time you face it briefly, tolerance increases. Over time, the same situation feels completely different, not because the situation changed, but because your response did. The invisible power of these choices lies in their consistency. One decision rarely matters. A pattern always does. This removes pressure. You no longer need to be perfect. You only need to be intentional often enough to shift direction. When you become aware of this, your attention changes. You stop obsessing over big transformations and start respecting small adjustments. You notice how you begin tasks, how you finish them, and how you talk to yourself in between. These details become signals instead of noise. The goal is not to control every decision. That would be impossible. The goal is to recognize that direction is set by what you do most often, not what you do occasionally. Once you understand the invisible power of tiny daily decisions, progress stops feeling overwhelming. You no longer ask how to change your entire life. You ask how to make today slightly better than yesterday. That question is manageable. And when it is answered consistently, it becomes transformative. This is how change actually happens, not through dramatic effort, but through quiet agreement with better choices, repeated until they reshape who you are. Chapter 4: How Consistency Quietly Outsmarts Motivation. Motivation is loud. It arrives with emotion, energy, and confidence. It makes you believe that change will be easy this time. Consistency, on the other hand, is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not wait for the right mood. It simply shows up. And over time, that quiet presence outperforms motivation in ways most people never notice until much later. Motivation is unreliable because it is reactive. It depends on how you feel, what just happened, or what you expect will happen next. Some days you wake up energized and driven. Other days, the same task feels heavy and pointless. When progress depends on motivation, progress becomes inconsistent. You move forward in bursts and stall in between. That stop and start pattern slowly erodes confidence. Consistency works differently. It does not ask how you feel. It asks what you decided. Instead of relying on emotional fuel, it relies on structure. When something is part of your routine, it no longer needs excitement to exist. It becomes normal. And normal behavior requires far less mental energy than motivated behavior. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't need motivation to do it. You don't wait until you feel inspired. You do it because it is part of your day. Consistency turns effort into something similar. What once felt difficult becomes automatic through repetition. One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing motivation creates consistency. In reality, consistency often creates motivation. Action generates momentum. Momentum creates belief. Belief fuels motivation. When you reverse this order and wait to feel motivated first, you delay action indefinitely. Consistency also reduces decision fatigue. Every time you decide whether or not to do something, you drain mental energy. When behavior is consistent, decisions disappear. There is no debate, you simply act. This frees up attention for more important thinking. Another reason consistency outsmarts motivation is emotional neutrality. Motivated action is emotional. When emotions change, behavior changes. Consistent action is neutral. It happens regardless of excitement, doubt, or boredom. This neutrality protects progress during difficult periods. When motivation is weakest, consistency also builds trust with yourself. Each time you follow through, even in small ways, you reinforce the belief that you are reliable. That belief becomes a stabilizing force. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop making promises you don't keep. Over time, self-trust becomes more valuable than motivation ever was. Motivation often aims high. It encourages dramatic goals and immediate transformation. Consistency aims low enough to be repeatable. This difference matters. High expectations create pressure. Pressure increases avoidance. Small, consistent actions reduce pressure and increase follow-through. Progress continues without emotional spikes. There is also a long-term advantage to consistency that motivation cannot offer: identity change. Motivation focuses on outcomes. Consistency focuses on behavior. Behavior repeated becomes identity. You don't become consistent because you succeeded, you succeed because you became consistent. This shift changes how you see yourself, not just what you achieve. Consistency also creates resilience. When setbacks happen, and they always do, motivated individuals often quit because their emotional fuel disappears. Consistent individuals adapt. Missing a day does not feel like failure. It feels like a break in pattern that can be repaired. This flexibility keeps progress alive. Another quiet strength of consistency is its invisibility. No one applauds steady effort. There is no instant recognition. This lack of external reward forces internal alignment. You continue not because you are praised, but because it is who you are becoming. That internal motivation is far stronger and more stable. Over time, consistency compounds results. The early stages feel slow and unimpressive, but consistency does not aim for speed. It aims for permanence. When results finally appear, they are durable. They do not vanish when motivation fades because they were not built on emotion to begin with. Consistency also simplifies life. You stop overthinking. You stop waiting. You stop starting over. You do the work, step by step, without drama. That simplicity creates clarity. Clarity reduces resistance. Resistance is what makes progress feel hard. Understanding how consistency outsmarts motivation changes how you approach growth. You stop chasing feelings and start designing systems. You stop asking how inspired you are and start asking how repeatable your actions are. This shift removes pressure and replaces it with confidence. Motivation will still appear from time to time. It can be useful, but it is no longer in control. Consistency becomes the foundation. Motivation becomes a bonus. Quietly, steadily, without demanding attention, consistency builds what motivation cannot sustain. And in the long run, it is not the strongest emotion that creates success, but the simplest action repeated without interruption. Chapter 5D. The compounding effect most people never notice. There is a reason most people give up before meaningful results appear. It is not because progress is impossible, but because progress is quiet in the beginning. The compounding effect works in silence. It does not announce itself. It does not reward you immediately. And because of that, it is often misunderstood, ignored, or abandoned long before it has a chance to change anything. Compounding is not dramatic. It is gradual. In the early stages, effort feels disconnected from outcome. You show up, you improve slightly, and nothing seems different. Days pass, weeks pass. From the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. Internally, however, something is being built, layer by layer, beneath the surface. Most people expect progress to be linear. They believe that if they put in effort today, results should appear tomorrow. When that does not happen, they assume the effort is useless. What they fail to see is that compounding does not move in straight lines. It moves slowly at first, then accelerates. The early phase feels unrewarding because the gains are too small to notice. Think of learning a new skill. At the beginning, improvement feels invisible. You practice, but you still feel clumsy. You repeat, but mistakes remain. Many quit here, believing they lack talent. In reality, they simply haven't stayed long enough for compounding to take effect. Skill growth stacks quietly until one day something clicks. Not because of a single practice session, but because of all the sessions combined. Compounding works because each small improvement builds on the last. A slight increase in skill makes the next practice more effective. A small gain in confidence makes the next challenge less intimidating. A tiny improvement in discipline makes consistency easier. These effects multiply, not add. The danger is that compounding punishes impatience. Those who quit early see no reward. Those who persist quietly pull ahead without obvious struggle. By the time results become visible, the gap is already wide. Another reason people miss compounding is because they measure progress incorrectly. They look for outcomes instead of indicators. They want visible success instead of subtle improvement. But compounding begins with changes in behavior, thinking, and response. These are internal shifts. They do not attract attention, but they change everything. Compounding also works in negative directions. Small neglects repeated over time create decline. Skipping effort once feels harmless. Avoiding discomfort occasionally feels justified. But when these choices repeat, they stack as well. The effect is slow, but the result is real. By the time consequences appear, the pattern is deeply ingrained. Understanding compounding forces you to take responsibility for what you repeat. Not what you intend, but what you actually do. Each repeated action is either building momentum or resistance. There is no neutral repetition. The most difficult part of compounding is trust. You must trust a process before it proves itself. You must continue when evidence is scarce. This requires patience and restraint, qualities that are rare in a world trained for instant feedback. Compounding also requires restraint from comparison. When you compare your early progress to someone else's mature results, the process feels discouraging. You forget that they are further along the curve. Compounding rewards those who focus on their own trajectory rather than someone else's timeline. Once compounding takes hold, effort feels different. Tasks become easier not because they require less work, but because you are better prepared. Decisions take less energy. Confidence grows quietly. Momentum becomes self-sustaining. This is when people start calling it talent or luck, unaware of the accumulation behind it. The compounding effect most people never notice is not a secret. It is simply ignored because it demands consistency without immediate reward. It asks you to work when no one is watching and continue when nothing seems to be changing. But if you stay long enough, compounding reveals its power. What once felt slow becomes unstoppable. Progress that seemed invisible becomes undeniable. And the effort you once questioned begins to pay returns far beyond what any single action could have created. Compounding does not favor intensity. It favors persistence. And those who understand this stop chasing quick results and start building something that grows quietly, steadily, and relentlessly over time. Chapter 60. Breaking the illusion of overnight success. The idea of overnight success is one of the most convincing illusions ever created. It appears everywhere, in stories, headlines, and conversations, suggesting that one moment, one decision, or one lucky break can suddenly change everything. This illusion is powerful because it offers hope without patience. It tells you that waiting is temporary and effort can be brief, but it also quietly sets people up for disappointment. Overnight success almost never happens the way it is presented. What looks sudden from the outside is usually the final visible result of years spent building quietly. The problem is not that people admire success. The problem is that they misunderstand how it forms. When you believe success should happen quickly, slow progress feels like failure. You begin to question your ability, your direction, or your worth. You assume that if nothing big has happened yet, nothing ever will. This belief causes many people to quit long before momentum begins. The illusion survives because preparation is invisible. No one sees the early mornings, the repeated mistakes, the small adjustments, or the long periods of uncertainty. They only see the moment when results finally cross a visible threshold. That moment looks sudden, but it is anything but. Breaking this illusion requires reframing how you view time. Growth is not delayed gratification, it is layered development. Each effort adds a layer. Each lesson deepens understanding. Each failure refines direction. None of these moments feel significant alone, but together they create readiness. Many people sabotage themselves by chasing speed instead of stability. They rush decisions, they skip foundations, they aim for recognition before competence. This creates fragile progress. Even when they experience a brief breakthrough, it collapses because nothing underneath can support it. True progress feels slow because it is designed to last. It gives you time to adapt, to learn, and to build resilience. Without this time, success becomes overwhelming, responsibility arrives before capability, pressure arrives before confidence. This imbalance often leads to burnout or retreat. Another danger of the overnight success illusion is comparison. When you measure your early stage against someone else's visible peak, you distort reality. You forget that you are looking at different chapters of different journeys. Comparison compresses timelines and creates unrealistic expectations. Breaking the illusion also restores self-respect. You stop judging yourself for not being there yet. You understand that being in progress is not a weakness. It is the process. This mindset allows you to stay engaged without frustration. When you release the demand for instant results, Your behavior changes. You take smarter risks. You invest in skill instead of shortcuts. You focus on learning rather than proving. This shift reduces anxiety and increases clarity. The illusion of overnight success also minimizes the value of patience. Patience is not passive waiting, it is active consistency without constant reward. It is choosing to continue even when validation is absent. This ability separates those who finish from those who start repeatedly. Once you break this illusion, progress feels calmer. You no longer rush to the next milestone. You pay attention to what you are building now. You understand that every stage has a purpose and skipping one weakens the next. Success that arrives gradually feels different. It feels earned. It feels stable. You trust it because you understand it. There is no fear of losing it overnight because you know exactly how it was built. Breaking the illusion of overnight success frees you from unrealistic pressure. It allows you to work with time instead of fighting it. And when you stop demanding instant transformation, you give progress the space it needs to become real. In that space, growth becomes sustainable, confidence becomes grounded, and success becomes something you are prepared to carry, not something you stumble into unready. Chapter 7. When discipline becomes your silent advantage. Discipline is often misunderstood because it rarely looks impressive. It does not create excitement. It does not arrive with motivation or emotion. It works quietly, behind the scenes, shaping behavior long before results appear. This is why most people underestimate it, and why it becomes such a powerful advantage for those who understand it. In the beginning, discipline feels restrictive. It asks you to act without waiting for desire. It requires you to choose consistency over comfort. Many people resist it because they associate freedom with doing what they feel like doing. But over time, something unexpected happens. Discipline does not limit freedom. It creates it. When discipline becomes part of your life, you stop negotiating with yourself. You no longer waste mental energy debating whether to act. Decisions that once felt heavy become automatic. This reduction in internal conflict frees attention, clarity, and energy. What used to require effort now requires only presence. Most people rely on motivation to move forward. Motivation is emotional and unpredictable. Discipline is behavioral and stable. When motivation fades, as it always does, discipline remains. It carries progress through boredom, doubt, and uncertainty. This reliability becomes an advantage precisely because it does not depend on mood. Discipline also changes how you experience difficulty. When effort is consistent, discomfort loses its intensity. You become familiar with challenge instead of threatened by it. What once felt intimidating becomes routine. This familiarity builds confidence not through success, but through endurance. Another quiet strength of discipline is self-respect. Each time you follow through, you reinforce trust in yourself. This trust accumulates. You stop doubting your ability to continue. You stop making excuses because you no longer believe them. This internal alignment creates calm strength. Discipline does not require harshness. It does not demand perfection. It simply asks for agreement, to do what matters even when it is not convenient. Over time, this agreement reshapes identity. You no longer see yourself as someone who tries. You see yourself as someone who does. This identity shift is subtle but powerful. You begin approaching challenges differently. You prepare instead of hoping. You act instead of waiting. You adjust instead of quitting. Discipline creates stability, and stability allows growth to deepen. Another reason discipline becomes a silent advantage is that it compounds quietly. No one applauds consistent effort. There is little external recognition. This forces progress to be internally driven. When validation is removed, purpose becomes clearer. You continue because the work matters, not because you are being watched. Discipline also protects momentum. When life becomes unpredictable, disciplined habits act as anchors. They keep you grounded. They maintain direction when everything else feels uncertain. This consistency during instability separates those who drift from those who advance. Over time, discipline reduces emotional swings. You stop riding waves of enthusiasm and disappointment. Progress becomes steady. This steadiness creates resilience. You are no longer easily shaken by setbacks because your behavior is no longer tied to outcomes alone. Many people believe discipline requires extraordinary strength. In reality, it requires clarity. When you know why something matters, showing up becomes simpler. Discipline is not about forcing yourself. It is about removing unnecessary choice. When discipline becomes your silent advantage, effort feels lighter, even though standards remain high. You are not pushing harder. You are pushing smarter. You move forward without drama, without pressure, and without constant reinforcement. This is why discipline often looks unremarkable from the outside, but transformative from the inside. It does not announce success, it builds it. Quietly, steadily, without asking for attention. And by the time others notice the results, discipline has already done its work, turning consistency into confidence and effort into something you can rely on, no matter what. Chapter 80. Turning ordinary habits into extraordinary results. Extraordinary results rarely come from extraordinary actions. They come from ordinary habits performed with intention, repeated without interruption, and refined over time. The difference between an average outcome and an exceptional one is often not intensity, but continuity. What you do every day quietly decides what your life becomes. Most habits form without conscious choice. They emerge from convenience, environment, and repetition. Once established, they operate automatically. This automation is powerful because it removes effort. But when habits are unexamined, they can just as easily reinforce stagnation as growth. Turning ordinary habits into extraordinary results begins with awareness, recognizing which behaviors are shaping your days. Habits matter because they reduce reliance on decision-making. Each time you repeat a behavior, you train your brain to expect it. Over time, the habit no longer requires motivation or willpower. It becomes the default. This default behavior shapes outcomes regardless of intention. You may want improvement, but habits deliver reality. The key is not creating dramatic habits, but designing small ones that align with the direction you want to move. Extraordinary results are rarely the product of sudden change. They are the result of alignment between behavior and long-term goals. When daily actions support future outcomes, progress becomes inevitable. Consider how habits influence skill. Improvement does not come from occasional practice, but from repeated exposure. Even a small daily habit builds familiarity. Familiarity reduces resistance. Resistance is what prevents people from continuing long enough to see results. When effort feels normal, persistence becomes possible. Habits also shape emotional responses. How you react to stress, discomfort, or uncertainty is often habitual. Some habits amplify anxiety. Others create stability. Changing these patterns does not require eliminating emotion, but adjusting response. A small pause before reacting can change the entire trajectory of a situation. Another reason habits create extraordinary results is their cumulative nature. Each repetition strengthens neural pathways. This makes future actions easier. What once felt difficult becomes effortless. This shift is often mistaken for talent when it is actually conditioning. Habits also influence self-image. Repeated actions send messages to the mind about who you are. Over time, these messages solidify into belief. You do not rise to the level of your intentions, you fall to the level of your habits. Changing habits changes identity. Identity then reinforces behavior. Extraordinary results emerge when habits are consistent, not perfect. Perfection creates pressure. Pressure leads to avoidance. Consistency creates familiarity. Familiarity leads to mastery. The habit does not need to be impressive. It needs to be repeatable. Environment plays a role as well. Habits thrive in supportive surroundings. Small changes in environment can make habits easier to maintain. Removing friction increases follow-through. When behavior becomes easier, consistency increases naturally. Turning habits into results also requires patience. Habits do not deliver instant rewards. Their value appears over time. This delayed return discourages many people. Those who continue despite slow feedback gain an advantage others abandon. Extraordinary results are not achieved by constantly upgrading habits. They are achieved by protecting the ones that matter most. Too many habits dilute focus. Few well-chosen habits concentrate impact. As habits strengthen, they create momentum. Momentum reduces effort. Reduced effort increases sustainability. This cycle continues until progress feels natural instead of forced. When ordinary habits are aligned and protected, results compound quietly. You may not notice change daily, but you will notice it eventually. And when you do, it will feel sudden, even though it was built slowly. Turning ordinary habits into extraordinary results is not about becoming exceptional overnight. It is about respecting the power of repetition. When small actions are honored consistently, they produce outcomes far beyond what intensity alone could achieve. This is how progress becomes stable. This is how growth becomes natural. And this is how ordinary behavior transforms into something truly extraordinary over time. Chapter 9. The long game that always beats talent alone. Talent creates attention, but it does not guarantee progress. It opens doors, but it does not decide how far you walk through them. The long game is what determines outcomes, and the long game does not reward potential. It rewards persistence. Many people rely on talent because it feels like an advantage. Early success comes easily. Effort feels light. Progress appears natural. But talent without continuation creates a dangerous comfort. When things come easily, discipline is rarely developed. When challenges arrive, and they always do, talent alone has nothing to lean on. The long game operates differently. It does not depend on how gifted you are. It depends on how willing you are to stay engaged when improvement becomes slow and unremarkable. The long game values patience over brilliance and resilience over speed. Consider how careers actually unfold. Early recognition often fades. Initial momentum slows. New challenges emerge that require skills not yet developed. Those who relied only on talent struggle here. Those who committed to learning and improvement adapt. Over time, the gap widens, not because of intelligence, but because of persistence. The long game rewards those who can tolerate boredom. Progress often becomes repetitive. The same skills refined again and again. The same actions repeated without novelty. Many talented individuals quit here because the excitement is gone. They mistake boredom for stagnation. In reality, this is where mastery is built. Talent also creates expectations. People assume you will succeed easily. When you encounter difficulty, shame appears. You may avoid challenges to protect the image of being naturally good. This avoidance limits growth. The long game removes this pressure. It focuses on development, not perception. Another strength of the long game is adaptability. Talent is static. It is what you start with. Skill is dynamic. It evolves. Those who commit to long-term improvement build layers of capability. They learn how to learn. This ability compounds far beyond any initial advantage. The long game also builds emotional resilience. Setbacks are inevitable. Rejection happens. Mistakes repeat. Those who play the long game expect these moments. They adjust instead of quitting. This resilience becomes a competitive advantage because it allows continuity when others retreat. Time favors consistency. Even small improvements repeated over years accumulate into expertise. What once required effort becomes instinctive. Decision-making improves. Confidence stabilizes. By the time results become visible, they appear effortless to others, but they were earned through time. The long game also shifts motivation. You stop seeking validation from short-term wins. You begin valuing progress itself. This internal motivation is more durable. It sustains effort when external rewards are absent. Talent may help you start, but it cannot help you continue. Continuation requires structure, discipline, and patience. These qualities are developed, not inherited. The long game builds them naturally through repetition and reflection. Over time, those who commit to the long game surpass those who relied on talent alone, not because they were better at the beginning, but because they stayed longer. They accumulated experience. They refined judgment. They learned from mistakes instead of hiding from them. The long game removes urgency. It replaces pressure with perspective. You understand that growth is not a race. It is a process. This understanding reduces anxiety and increases clarity. When you commit to the long game, progress stops feeling fragile. You are no longer dependent on perfect conditions or constant success. You trust your ability to adapt, learn, and continue. Talent may get attention early, but the long game always decides who remains. And in the end, it is not brilliance that lasts. It is persistence applied patiently over time. Chapter 10. Living the 1% rule until success becomes inevitable. Living the 1% rule is not about chasing improvement. It is about committing to a way of living that no longer depends on pressure, urgency, or sudden change. By the time you reach this point, something fundamental has already shifted inside you. You no longer ask how to transform your life overnight. You ask how to show up slightly better today than you did yesterday. This mindset changes everything. The 1% rule works because it removes the drama from growth. It replaces intensity with intention. Instead of waiting for motivation, you rely on alignment. Instead of forcing outcomes, you focus on direction. Progress stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like a process you trust. Living this way requires humility. You accept that progress is not always visible. You learn to respect the invisible work, the choices no one applauds, the habits no one sees, the discipline that does not announce itself. This quiet commitment becomes your foundation. Over time, the 1% rule reshapes how you experience effort. Effort no longer feels heavy because it is no longer extreme. You are not asking yourself to change everything. You are asking yourself to improve one thing slightly. That simplicity reduces resistance. Reduced resistance increases consistency. Consistency builds momentum. Momentum is what makes success feel inevitable. When you live by the 1% rule, setbacks lose their power. A bad day does not derail you because your identity is no longer tied to perfection. You understand that progress is built through patterns, not moments. Missing once does not matter. Quitting does. This way of living also changes how you view time. You stop rushing the process. You stop comparing your pace to others. You trust that small gains, when protected, always accumulate. Time becomes an ally instead of a source of pressure. As the months and years pass, the effects become undeniable. Skills sharpen, confidence stabilizes, decisions improve. What once required effort now feels natural. Others may call it discipline, luck, or talent. You know the truth. It was alignment, repeated patiently. The most powerful aspect of the 1% rule is that it transforms identity. You no longer see yourself as someone who tries. You see yourself as someone who progresses. This identity is stable. It does not collapse under stress or uncertainty. It adapts. Living the 1% rule also brings peace. You stop measuring yourself against unrealistic standards. You stop demanding instant results. You learn to value direction over speed. This peace does not make you passive. It makes you resilient. Eventually, success stops feeling like a distant goal. It becomes a natural outcome of how you live. You no longer chase it. You build toward it quietly, steadily, and deliberately. The pressure fades because you trust the process you have committed to. This is what makes success inevitable. Not talent, not intensity, not perfection, but consistency aligned with intention. As this journey closes, remember this: you do not need to change your entire life. You only need to respect the power of small improvements done consistently. Every day offers a choice. Every choice shapes direction, and direction, when held long enough, determines destination. Live the 1% rule not as a strategy, but as a standard. Let progress become part of who you are, and when you look back one day, you will realize that nothing changed all at once, yet everything changed for good. That is how success is built. Quietly, inevitably.